All right, let's get going. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you may be. Welcome to the Straight Talk series co-hosted by ZPro Solutions and Sharptree. This is our inaugural session, so bear with us if we have any glitches as we go through this today from a technical standpoint, but we're very pleased to have everybody connected today and joining us to kick off this series. And today's topic, of course, is IBM Maximo Application Suite. We know there's been a lot of confusion, a lot of discussion, a lot of just general searching for information. So in our Straight Talk series, focusing on Maximo Application Suite or MAS 8, Maximo 8, very different ways you've heard about it. We just want to be able to try to get through the noise and help you to better identify what the path forward is and help you to understand the fact that it's not a difficult path. So Jason, if you can go ahead and move to the next slide. What we wanted to cover today from an agenda standpoint is a brief overview about what MAS really is, what Maximo 8 or Maximo Application Suite really is, the benefits of moving to MAS, and then of course a technical overview and a discussion about what it really means to implement Maximo Application Suite. Of course, we want to also be able to help you to better understand a strategy that you can use for implementing Maximo 8. And then we also will be talking about mobility for Maximo Application Suite because there's some options, and we want to make sure that you understand the options, not only provided by ZPro Solutions and Sharptree, but also IBM themselves. We will have time for a Q&A. And we will plan to open up the lines to allow you to ask any questions that you have. But of course, at any point in time, you can put questions into the chat window. Just look for questions on your particular GoToWebinar control panel, and you can go ahead and insert a question in that. If you don't want to be heard by voice, then of course we can raise that question for you on your behalf when we get to that Q&A. So for introduction purposes, just want to introduce myself. I'm Bob Keeley. I'm the Director of Business Development and Partner Alliances, as well as the Director of Operations for ZPro Solutions. I've been in the software business for 25 plus years, working with various software solutions across many different industries. And right now, our focus with ZPro is on the Maximo Application Suite, and of course support of Maximo in general, the various versions of Maximo that are available across the transit industry as well as various other industries. We're joined today by the Sharptree team, and Jason, I'll go ahead and let you take over and introduce yourself.
Thank you. So Jason Van Heusen, I'm one of the founders of Sharptree. I've been doing Maximo for the past 20 years plus. Have a variety of experience in many different industries, as you can see there, including oil and gas, food production, transportation, government, done pharmaceutical work as well. And recently founded Sharptree primarily to do mobile applications for Maximo, but also with that experience, of course, a lot of experience setting up MAS 8 and other Maximo instances. Jim?
Jim, you may be on mute.
Yeah, I'm introducing myself to the mute button. There you go. That's a good start. As much like Jason, I have 20 years experience implementing Maximo, mostly on the project management side and also mobile applications. Until recently, I was the lead at Deloitte for the Maximo practice, and I joined Sharptree recently to for the excitement of continuing that process. Can we go to the next slide? I promise this is the only IBM sourced slide we're going to walk through today. I just wanted to give an overview of what the Maximo Application Suite looks like. So previously, when people said Maximo, they were talking about the manage component. So, the core Maximo, the core application that allows you to create work orders, track your inventory, do PMs, track your assets. IBM has done is they've aggregated all the other tools that they connected to and created for Maximo, monitor, health, predict, visual inspection, mobile, into a suite. We're going to talk about how MAS 8 makes it easier to connect these to Maximo, and all of this sits on in the cloud. So there is a technical lift to get to MAS 8, and we're going to talk fairly extensively about that and answer any questions you may have. And it is also available for any cloud, if you will, including internal, if you wish to go that route. And again, we're going to talk about the various options that are available to you. Can we flip to the next slide? The benefits of moving to MAS, as I alluded to earlier, are from a functional standpoint, Manage has not changed that much. There is a brand new UI. It has a modern look and feel. We have MAS 8 up and running, and we believe the UI is cleaner and easier to understand and easier to use. As I said earlier, easy to add additional components to MAS, to Maximo. So if you have Manage and I want to install Monitor because I eventually want to get to health and Predict. So it's easier to do that. It is easier to connect it to an AI engine to help you make decisions. So with the fact that Manage hasn't changed that much, since it's the core module for most customers, there's minimal training needed for MAS to move to the Manage component on MAS. Mobile Maximo is also included with MAS. You have to have a valid user license, but they've included the mobile piece, and we'll get into that later. And there are updates to the other modules. So there are updates to Health Monitor, specifically to Health Monitor and Visual Inspections have some significant updates. From a technology standpoint, this is a containerized version, and Jason's going to explain what containerized means, because I think it's interesting. And containerization has benefits. Once you've built a containerized version, you can move it around very easily. You can run multiple MAS environments in a single container, so you don't necessarily have to have multiple. You don't have to have multiple servers running non-production environments. If you want to spin up a MAS environment quickly, you can do that. So there are benefits to getting to the process of updating to MAS. Hosted and cloud offerings also offer a lot of outsourced management, so you don't have to deal with upgrading technology. You don't have to deal with upgrading servers. Security offerings, infrastructure are all kind of included in the cloud offering. And OpenShift, as Jason will allude to, we'll talk about, is the management tool for your administration. Operational administrative benefits, you pay for what you use. So the app points model, which we'll talk about briefly, allows you to pay for what you use and scale up if you need to. It does maintain current support status, so there is a fairly long runway for the support. I believe they're talking 2025, 2027 for an extension. So there is a decent runway, but people should start thinking about it at this point. And hosted environments, as I said earlier, simplify IT operations and administration. And cloud, same thing if you're on a cloud environment. Next. And with that, I'll give it to Jason to talk tech with you.
From a technical overview, we thought it would be just good to review kind of where we're at today. This happens to be with Control Desk. As you can see, there's numerous components. You might have a UI cluster, an integration cluster, cron cluster, each one of these being set up within WebSphere application server on a physical server that you're managing with its own storage and memory and all of that. Potentially separate reporting clusters, database is separate, load balancing is separate. You have all of these disparate components that each one needs to be managed separately. And WebSphere is its own thing as far as number of components within that need to be managed, and kind of its own technology as far as clustering. There's very specific things around clustering with WebSphere that are specific to WebSphere, as opposed to being more of a standard way of handling that. So what we see with MAS is really a unification of all of those components into a single managed environment. And from a containerization standpoint, containerization is a technology that allows you to package not only the application, but all of its dependencies into a single bundle, for lack of a better metaphor for you, kind of keeping it high level, that can then be deployed to any machine that has a container runtime. So OpenShift is what we call container orchestration. So you will have a separate container for each one of those cluster elements. You'll have a different container, say for the database, for UI, for integration. They're all flavors of, prepackaged flavors of those components that then can be deployed within an OpenShift environment. Now, OpenShift then handles all the things that we saw in that last diagram as far as load balancing, networking, storage, and distribution of memory and processor resources across numerous hosts. So this lets you really define, instead of managing separate components, a total operating environment where Maximo can then be deployed. Now, there's obviously a lot of skills and lift to get there, but once there, this is allowing IBM to do things like add-on monitor or health or predict without having to do a massive installation, without having to integrate these solutions, since they can all run in this one environment. So you really have the ability to unify what were all these separate pieces that needed to be managed separately into a single operating environment, and really get the benefits of having that all in a unified system. So I'll pass it back to Jim to talk about some of the considerations when we talk about how to actually deploy this.
So there are, we see 3 different options for hosting that are available to you. They're more around where you're doing the hosting and who you're paying to do the hosting, if you will. SaaS is IBM offers MAS as a software as a service offering, but be aware that it is not a classic SaaS. It's not Salesforce. It's not a multi-tenant. They are hosting an environment for you. They are spinning up a container. They are plugging it into their cloud, and they are, giving you the rights to add users to it. But it does have benefits. It's probably the simplest to deploy. Get out the checkbook, write IBM a sizable check, and you have X number of users on and available. They'll give you credentials. It is scalable, so you can scale it as required. Most of these are scalable, but some of them you'd have to make 2 phone calls. You might have to call Amazon for your cloud provider, and you might have to call IBM for your licenses. So there's a little bit more administration required probably. Security on at least the first 2, SaaS and hosted, are handled by the hosting entity. Again, IBM is serving as the hosting entity here for the most part. There are different business terms to SaaS versus IBM hosted. So there is a little bit of a difference to it. You pay for what you use. So in terms of hosting, if you spin up 80 cores, you're paying for 80 cores. If you decide, hey, 80 is too much, I don't need that much, or I want to scale up, you can scale up or down. And you don't have to worry about infrastructure and technology upgrades. The cons are it's off-premise, so some folks like it on-premise around internet disruptions. reading about a few internet disruptions this morning. Again, I said this earlier, it's not a true multi-tenant SaaS. So it's not a, hey, you know, it's not a subscription service, if you will, so much. You are subscribing from a business standpoint, not from a technical standpoint, if you will. Hosted is the same thing, although it can be hosted wherever. So again, you can use cloud, you could use whatever cloud provider you want, you wish to use. It is simpler to deploy. You don't have to deal with infrastructure. You don't have to spin up servers. You may not have to get your internal administration people involved. It also has many of the same benefits as SaaS. The infrastructure administration tasks are outsourced. You can purchase it as a service. You can purchase the hosting as a service. Again, you'd probably have to make 2 phone calls because you got to call IBM and you got to call your hosting provider. There is a large choice of providers that provide various levels of service and various levels of cost. Again, the only con we could really see to this one is off-premise, and it's vulnerable to internet disruptions. Internal, you can host this internal. Again, you're essentially going to use an internal cloud or a series of servers and set this up. If you're a big sophisticated client and you have this, it's probably a benefit. It might be a benefit to you. We're not seeing a lot of people go this route. Most companies are, you know, if I can put it on the cloud and I can pay as I go, that's the route I want to take. It does allow you to develop and leverage some of the skills around managing either the cloud or the application, and we're going to talk about those skills a little bit later on. The cons are kind of stack up here. It's complex. You have to manage servers, manage an internal cloud. Your management costs may be higher because there's supervision involved, and there's also technical skills required. You have a capital outlay for infrastructure. It may require skills that your organization does not have or in short supply. So if you look around your organization and you say, hey, do I have somebody who really knows OpenShift? If the answer is no, or there's one person and he's got a phone stuck in each ear, you might have a hard time spinning this up. And again, you're kind of taking on all the administration tasks, right? You're taking on security, you're taking on the system administration, infrastructure, backups, all the good stuff that goes along with that.
Hey, Jim, just a quick question for clarity because of the terms we always hear within the market. So in your first column, SaaS, that's really the IBM cloud service offering, correct?
That is, yes.
And hosted is still, it's kind of a hybrid cloud because it's still a cloud offering, but obviously, we're not having to deal with the typical maintenance of a server as a client maintaining their own server farm.
I think that the big difference is that it's hosted could be AWS or DigitalOcean or one of the other providers. It could be an Oracle cloud if that's the way your corporation goes. So right. It doesn't have to be IBM. I think is the big difference. And then there is a business process difference around SaaS and hosted.
And then your label of internal, that's same as on-premise.
That is on-premise, yes.
Okay. And just for clarity, in that hosted column, ZPro Solutions, Sharptree, we are in the process of putting together an offering as a hybrid hosted provider. So we can talk about that during the Q&A session as well. Thank you, Jim.
Yeah, and just to be clear as well, internal can include private cloud. So you may have, while it's internal and effectively on-premise managed by you, it is possible to deploy it on, say, AWS on part of your company's overall hosted infrastructure that isn't your private cloud. So when IBM talks about hybrid cloud, that's really what they're talking about, is a merging of both the public and private.
Right. The other way to look at it is with the traditional SaaS offering, it's a steady cost, a manageable cost that you can budget. Hosted, of course, is a manageable cost. Internal, well, you're budgeting the entire maintenance yourself, so that could fluctuate.
Exactly.
You may also be onboarding skills that that you don't necessarily need full time to do that.
Correct. Correct. So obviously that hosted, offering and or the SaaS offering would be our recommendation, just from a, straight talk perspective. Great. Thank you, Jim.
Next. Jason, this is you, right?
Yeah, so some additional considerations from a technical standpoint. You've probably heard the talk about, it's 100 cores, 100 processor cores, and 300 gigabytes of memory, that sort of thing. There is certainly a significant larger base infrastructure requirement for MAS 8. That said, a lot of that is the overhead of Kubernetes, which is the underlying platform, container management platform, and OpenShift, which itself requires significant resources just for the management component. Once that is all set up within that environment, it then becomes an incremental add instead of a continual scaling of that size. So if I want to add an additional, in the traditional sense, JVM or node to the Maximo cluster, we're only looking at the 2 CPUs or 2 cores and 4 gigs of memory allocation as required. Again, this is a huge pool that can then be distributed amongst all of your resources. So when we talk about production and test environments and dev environments, all of that can run on one instance of OpenShift. So a lot of that overhead can be shared amongst multiple instances and multiple environments. So there is a base requirement for a fairly high technical base for that low watermark, but once that's in place, it doesn't really increase that much from there. And overall, the costs and the specs are actually not that different between traditional Maximo and MAS 8. So when you look at the overarching or overall hardware requirements, they are slightly larger because of the overhead of OpenShift, but not tremendously. There are a number of new technologies introduced with MAS, the biggest being OpenShift. Again, what I found having done an installation of OpenShift and deployment of MAS 8 from scratch is really what you're looking at is akin to the move from client server to, say, the web architecture in the late 90s, early 2000s. We're kind of seeing a similar shift today with OpenShift and containerization and managed services. That's sort of the idea of all of your servers, instead of being individual resources that you need to manage, having an orchestration layer that really pulls all that into a single environment that can be managed. And that's really what OpenShift's about. So if you listen to the IBM presentations, there's a lot of talk about at scale. So they'll talk, I think I counted almost a dozen times that they mentioned the word at scale. Really what OpenShift is about is taking all of your resources and, instead of honestly kind of squandering them amongst individual applications, taking that and making it more of a mesh of a single environment with resources that I can allocate as necessary, as opposed to having them be siloed. Underneath, there's a lot of supporting technologies, like MongoDB now becomes the basis for the user management. There's also a component for MongoDB with the app points tracking and IBM's Suite Licensing Service, or SLS, and Behavior Analytics Service, the BAS. Those are the two things that are required for the app points to work. Both of those use MongoDB, and BAS uses Kafka underneath for tracking that. Honestly, most of that is pretty transparent once set up. And things like MongoDB can be managed externally. Again, you have the ability to outsource this or have it be hosted by somebody else. There's a lot of MongoDB as a service, and we're starting to see a shift towards that, where you can buy these individual things as services. From a technology standpoint, WebSphere Liberty replaces WebSphere and WebLogic. This was a move that was already happening in 7.6.1. So you see that already moving with containerization. WebSphere Liberty becomes the new application server. Again, in practice, because of the way and the nature it's deployed, you're dealing more with the container rather than the individual components like WebSphere Liberty. You really won't have any interaction with WebSphere on a day-to-day basis like you might today. And from a technology standpoint, again, Cognos is no longer supported in MAS. That's not to say that it's not supported, it's no longer included as an entitlement with MAS. So if you are currently using Cognos, you will need to switch off. BERT is still the reported engine for Maximo. You could still license Cognos separately and connect it to your DB2 database, but that'll be a separate thing. And on that point, from a database perspective, there is the Cloud Pak for Data, which allows you to deploy DB2 within your OpenShift environment. That has its own layer and requirements, not really covered in the core MAS. I think the expectation, generally speaking, is that you will continue to deploy your database as a separate standalone instance. And that is, again, completely supported. So you can kind of mix and match your services and deploy them where you see best. From skills and resources, you're going to need somebody who knows OpenShift and Kubernetes well. Fortunately, that market is expanding. There's a lot of people that understand that, as well as the whole cloud hosting and administration. So those two things I think are becoming more common, and you probably have people that are within your organization that know cloud hosting and probably even Kubernetes within especially the larger organizations. Things like Mongo, Kafka, Couch really are just kind of secondary services. I don't think you're going to look at needing an expert in these. You probably need somebody to help you set it up and set up the maintenance schedule, but they're really more components of MAS rather than standalone technologies on their own. Jim mentioned this, but there's really very little functional changes, especially within Manage for MAS, which we view as probably a wise choice. Given the scale of technical changes, keeping the UI and the general look and feel and operational components of Maximo more or less the same will probably make that transition a lot easier as you go forward. From a licensing consideration, you've heard a lot about app points, and I'll say, apart from the fact that the initial publication of pricing for app points was really high, and I think IBM is adjusting to the market's response to that. The app point model really provides a really nice way of doing concurrent users and really making it so that you can just pay for what you need. And simplifying the licensing, even though I feel that IBM has not done a good job of communicating how this is simple, it really does make it easier by saying an app point is the base currency for all solutions within Maximo. So you don't need to necessarily buy separate licenses or have separate agreements for each add-on. So if you want visual inspections or you want monitor, you want to expand your footprint of Maximo and really get more value out of it, the app point model provides that sort of flexibility. So as it says, you can install the additional components without having to necessarily even purchase additional app points. There are some is what they call install points, which is sort of a base level of app points needed for a solution. But from a user perspective and allocating users, there are no additional requirements. So if I want to put in an add-on to Maximo, I don't have to go through a full new license agreement, which is a huge benefit and really simplifies the overarching view of what am I using and how many people are using Maximo and what's the usage, which again I think is a real benefit. If you need help translating those licenses, both ZPro and Sharptree are here to help. We spend a lot of time talking with our partners, talking with IBM, understanding this model so that we can help you make that transition from your existing current licensing model. And there are pretty clear roads, again, maybe not well communicated, but there is a really clear path from the existing license model to the app points.
So Jason, from a upgrade path, what you're really saying is don't worry about the confusion of app points, because I like your use of the term, app points is really the currency, for Maximo going forward. But if I do want new functionality, or if I want to add the updated health or safety components of Maximo, I don't have to go to IBM and license those individually. It's really just acquire more app points, correct?
Exactly. And you don't need to worry about which users, how many users are going to use this particular add-on. If I have app points to cover it, then I can allocate those. And I can shift them around if necessary.
Making it that simple all along.
One other thing that's not on here, I do want to mention, we talked about hosting, and a lot of this move to OpenShift and Red Hat is following and making it possible for organizations like Sharptree and ZPro to offer Maximo as a service, or to treat it as more of a managed service. So I think that's a big thing that's underpinning a fairly large technical shift that will make the overall management of Maximo a lot easier. So there's a fairly large hump to get over as far as that road from existing Maximo to MAS 8, but once you're there, it significantly simplifies the management, both from a technical standpoint and also, again, the licensing model makes it easier.
Yeah, and the good thing is, like you said, from an upgrade path perspective, we're not expecting a heavy training curve or learning curve, because of the fact that the core, which is now labeled Maximo Manage, is relatively the same as the core asset and work order functionality that was in prior versions of Maximo.
Exactly.
Excellent.
So Jim, you want to talk a little bit about the strategy for moving to MAS? Thanks, Jason. We just wanted to lay out, if you're considering moving to MAS, this isn't a formula for the actual move, but we don't believe that the move is that significant in terms of a lift once organizations kind of know what they're doing. But we believe you should define a potential timeline for transition. Again, I spoke earlier about what the support model is, what the support timeline is, and what IBM has put forward. IBM has also published a roadmap. They've talked about it on some webinars. So if there's a functionality you really believe that would benefit your business, you might want to take that into consideration. You probably should assess your readiness. And Sharptree or ZPro could help you with that, but are you ready from a technical standpoint? Maybe you already have a cloud hosting provider. Maybe you already have people internally who know OpenShift or cloud operations. So from a technical standpoint, you're kind of set. From a functional standpoint, hey, I've been thinking about installing Monitor because I want to install Health down the road. Or I'm looking at a mobile solution, maybe this is a simpler path to a mobile solution. So from a functional standpoint, what can this help you add? From a business standpoint, the licensing model, again, is confusing people a little bit. We do believe that the app points model is simple. The confusion comes in sometimes from where you're coming from. Hey, I own an enterprise license. How does that translate to MAS going forward? And that should be a fairly straightforward exercise, figuring out how many users you have, what applications do they use, and how many app points does that require? And then, and IBM is probably not gonna love that I'm gonna say this, but you're paying IBM maintenance going forward. So how does the app points I need to buy going forward compare to my cost going forward of maintaining Maximo 7.6 dot whatever. So you do the comparison and you say, oh, it's going to cost me a little bit more, but my maintenance was probably going to go up next year anyway, kind of thing. So and then you negotiate with IBM. Define any upgrades and changes. I talked about that. If you really want to install Monitor, or you have Monitor installed and now it's time to plug Health in and get some benefit out of it, have at it. Decide whether you wish to host it internally or third party. So again, that's the hosting decision we talked about earlier. this is a push for the Maximo, but engage your Maximo consultants or your MAS application provider to understand the licensing options. Again, it is a little confusing from where you're coming from to where you're going. So if you're an enterprise user or you have a perpetual license for X number of users, how does that translate to what you need to pay going forward? Define the changes you need to accommodate MAS and refine your timeline. So based on what you learned in steps 2 through 5, what is your timeline, and then get to installing it. The key message here is that, yes, there is a moderate business and technical lift to get to MAS 8. The technical effort is a little opaque at the moment, just because people are just learning about it. It's something new, but we have MAS 8 up and running and installed, and know how to install it. So we see it as a moderate technical lift, and it's a little bit of a business problem, and then you move forward. But we think the benefits moving forward are well worth the effort.
So with that, there is also mobile for MAS. You'll certainly see IBM showing their mobile application, all new with MAS. Sharptree has developed what we call OPCO, which is ready for MAS. Also works with 7609 forward, so is absolutely transparent. So we talk about making that move easy. If you're looking for a mobile solution, I'm going to demonstrate OPCO, showing it running against MAS, just to kind of show what is available in that regard, and I'll let IBM demo their own product on another webinar. So with that, I'm just going to take a moment and share my screen. So this is a device running in my hand. So OPCO is a new mobile solution for Maximo. As I mentioned, works with 7609 all the way through MAS 8. Hopefully it's going to show up there. And unfortunately, while it's showing, it's not actually keeping up. One moment, I'm going to just restart my screen sharing. There we go. All right, so OPCO is, again, new application for Maximo. Has really simple install. Actually, there is no install, no server components. We have a YouTube video that we can link to showing the entire install process. It takes about 1.5 minutes. We have really easy service discovery, allowing you to do either a configuration code, email, or you can even scan a QR code with your environment information. So you can download it from the App Store, and immediately get connected up to your Maximo. In this case, I've set up this against MAS 8. I'm going to go ahead and log in as Joe O. I'm going to show a basic work order process and asset discovery using OPCO. So when we log in, we're presented with a dashboard showing that I have some work orders available, categorized with different widgets that are configurable, showing how many work orders I have, how many are urgent, overdue, and I also have an action plan. And I can also see that I have 2 work orders that are due today. I went in earlier, looked at my whole list, and pulled out an action plan by starring them. You can see the little star to perform some actions. So I'm going to go ahead and perform my asset collection. And I have a work order that is approved. It's scheduled actually for 6:20 tonight. Has some hazards. It's in the boiler room. Has 4 activities, a couple of attachments, and a work log. Each one of these, from a configuration standpoint, is its own widget that is configurable. So you can move them around. You can change some properties on them. They have some different behaviors. For instance, on the time tracker, I can either do time tracking, or I can simply add my time through start, finish, or start and finish. So easy ways to enter in our time. And work logs, we've made that really simple. So please make sure you check behind the boiler. I've got a note to myself. I can say, sure thing, and add that to the work log on the work order. From a hazard perspective, I can see that I'm going to be in a confined space while I'm doing this collection. There's temperature issues, and it might be noisy, so I need to wear some hearing protection. We also wanted to guide the user through their activities, so we provide an overview of their activities in order. You can see that I'm currently on the boiler room, first one, the centrifugal pump, and I haven't started it. I can also see that same view here where it's walking me through my next activity. Clicking my next activity, this is actually an inspection. So we have taken the inspection form, rendered it on the device, and provided the ability to enter in information about the asset that I'm collecting. We've also added the ability to take a picture. So I'm just going to go ahead and take a picture of this label here. And then do text recognition, and using AI, we can evaluate that, that label that you see here, pull out the components, and as you can see, it's extracted the serial number as well as the capacity, the total head, and the speed limit, all from just scanning that label. If there's anything else that I want to pull in, let's say I can zoom in here and I can see that there's a tag. I can pull that down and say, okay, well, that's my description. Or if I have other information that I want to capture, I can simply drag and drop, or I can say I'm going to add, let's say, FlowServe as the description, and this, let's see, yeah. I can also tap on this and change and add. So go ahead and just edit that right there, and save it. And once I'm done, go ahead and save. And all that information is put onto the asset. I also have the ability to scan, let's say if I've got an asset tag, I can simply scan the QR code and select that and add it to my asset collection. So all of this information is being collected in an inspection form in Maximo, again, using 7609 all the way through MAS. I can go ahead and just take pictures, whatever else I need to do. And when I'm done, I can complete that inspection and complete the activity. And what you'll see is it's now moved my activity down to the next item that I need to perform. And I can do this whole process over again. Also, we do have an ability to see the overview, each one of the steps on the inspection and, or in this case, asset collection, and walk through that, making it very simple. Once you can also see that my status has been moved into progress, so we have some intelligence around performing these actions. And I won't go through a full demonstration of it, but we do have the ability to add either an asset collection or inspection, or even report an issue ad hoc. So I can go and say, set up a work order to say, please go collect all the assets in a given location, and let somebody simply do that ad hoc. Once complete, now I've logged in as Joe O, who is a manager. These collections are routed for review so that a user can come in as a manager, review and or edit the collection that was performed. In this case, I have one from before. Review all of the data, and then choose to make an action from that. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and create a new asset from that action, and I can see asset 2115 has been created. So when we go over to MAS, and this will be the opportunity to see MAS, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. But I'll keep this, actually, I'll keep this up and move this over a bit so you can see both. I'm going to go ahead and log in. And this is our internal MAS instance that we set up. Just for interest, it is on our private cloud. We've installed it from scratch on DigitalOcean with our own managed resources. It's not just, IBM certainly offers like the OpenShift as a service. This does actually have us running it on our own bare metal. So if I look, you can see the new look and feel with the menu, a little bit cleaner. I think a little nicer navigation. Won't spend too much time on it, but very similar user dynamics as far as how I search. And you can see this asset that was created from my asset collection form, which ultimately is just an inspection form in Maximo. So we're leveraging the inspection form to allow for capture of the data, and then using the inspection form actions to allow for processing of that, so that users can then create or edit or reject asset collections and or inspections all within Maximo. So that's just a very quick flavor of Opco for Maximo, making Maximo really easy and simple for users to use, and also hopefully easing that transition from traditional Maximo to MAS. So with that, I want to leave some time for questions and Q&A so we can answer any questions that you have. So we'll transition back to that.
Thank you, Jason. And I'll facilitate this process because there has been some questions asked. One of the questions was, is Opco available on all platforms, for typical smartphones and tablets?
So yes, it is available for smartphones and tablets on iOS and Android. We actually do have separate builds for tablets, so we take advantage of that real estate and have been thoughtful about how we do that. So if you're doing an asset collection in particular, I demonstrated this on a phone, kind of to show how easy that is. On a tablet, you have more real estate to, say, when I took that picture, view the image and do that manipulation. Windows is pending, so we are based on Flutter, and as soon as support for Windows is available for that platform, we will also support Windows.
Great. One of the questions going back to MAS itself was in the slides as we were showing them, we showed DB2 and Oracle as a database platform, but is SQL Server still supported?
Yes, it is.
Okay, great. Another question that I received prior to today's session was, do I have the capability, helping with the transition from traditional Maximo to the application suite? Do I have the capability to run both flavors, if you will, side by side? Is there any restrictions in licensing or technical capabilities that I couldn't have both versions running at the same time for a period of time?
So similar to different versions of Maximo, even point releases, you can have them run independently at the same time. They won't connect to the same database because the application is tied to a database version. So if you're looking to have MAS 8 set up in a test environment, you certainly can run that while you evaluated it. But when you make that cutover, you do need to make the cutover from one version to another.
Okay. Question in general about the integration topic, and the way the question was posed was, I've got 20 integrations that I currently do to my current instance of Maximo, but going to MAS, do I have to rewrite all those integrations?
So the short answer is no. Most of the integration, like from a functional standpoint, hasn't changed. All the old integration capabilities are still there. There are some changes internally. The JMS message queues go away and are replaced by Kafka, but that's a technical change, not so much a functional change. So all the integrations work the same. There is the ability even to include custom code. So if you have custom user exits that you've developed, those are also portable. IBM would certainly like you to move more to automation scripts, since that's contained within the database and you don't have to change or modify the build and deploy process for the container as you do with customizations. But those are all supported.
Okay. One question I see here is that, we noticed your comment about Cognos not being supported in MAS or Maximo 8, and I'm not really a BERT fan. What are my other options?
So it's not so much that it's not supported, it's not licensed. So if you want to continue to use Cognos, it certainly can connect to the database as other reporting tools can as well. So you can continue to use Crystal Reports or Cognos or any other reporting engine. It just isn't provided and licensed with Maximo.
Okay. Another question I'm seeing is, do we have application designer for UI changes in MAS 8?
Yes, you do.
Okay. Another question that just popped in, does MAS include a document management solution to help bridge the gap between silos in operations, maintenance, and engineering? Or will OPCO support viewing procedures, manuals, drawings, that kind of documentation?
Yeah, so there are document management solutions now within OPCO. Off the top of my head, I'm sorry, I don't remember within MAS, off the top of my head, I don't remember which component it is, but IBM has made great strides in bringing that into Maximo. I believe it might be part of the assist package, where there is the ability to digest and bring in documents and procedures and other kind of document things that were traditionally in document management systems. There is a much better document management system integration with MAS 8. With OPCO, we do support attached documents as traditional, so any manuals or other documents that are associated with an asset or work order are available on the device and can be viewed on the device. There's still, again, from a systems perspective, there's still a fairly significant lift, and I think IBM underplays the amount of effort it is to bring all of those documents together. That doesn't happen magically, but they are providing the infrastructure to actually support it. So if you're willing to put in the effort to digitize, to maintain those documents, there are now capabilities to do that.
Right. Another question that I see is related to not just mobility, but the connectivity for given users. And the question is more along the lines of, can I be disconnected offline, if you will, and then when I get to a particular spot, it just automatically will reconnect and sync up from my device or my laptop, whenever I have that Wi-Fi connection.
So if we're talking about OPCO, yes, fully offline. Any information that you have on the device is available offline. So all your work order information, all of the asset information necessary to perform that work, any documents, any data necessary for the execution of the work order is available offline. So Maximo on their mobile product, or IBM on their mobile product, has indicated that it's offline capable. I personally have not used it. I know they've had some struggles in the past with that. MAS 8 still requires a connection and is still a web-based app.
Okay. Just polling the audience. Any additional questions, feel free to put into the chat and or the questions window. That's where we've been sourcing some of these questions as we've been having this open conversation here at the tail end of our time today. One other thing that we did put into the chat is that we are soliciting topics for future Straight Talk sessions, because we do want to make sure that this series is addressing what you want to hear. So if you do have any suggestions, feel free to email those suggestions. As you see, Jason, James, myself, all of our emails are shown on the screen. Or if you want to place that into the chat today, that'd be great, so that we can make sure that as we keep this monthly series going, that we're addressing the topics that you definitely do want us to be discussing. Jason, Jim, any additional comments that you want to make at this time?
I would just like to say thank you, everyone, for joining, and thank you for your attention. If you have any additional questions, reach out to Jason, myself, or Bob, and we'll be happy to help you out.
I'll echo those things.
One last question that has popped in is, I guess it's a matter of they didn't see it on the screens. What's happened to the industry versions of Maximo, like Maximo for transportation? Are those still supported at the Mass or Maximo 8 level?
They are.
That. Yeah, go ahead. They are licensed a little differently. You need to upgrade to a premium license on the for the user to have access to those, but they are fully supported and still available.
Great. I'm sorry, Jason, I threw that question in just as you were about to say something.
Oh, I was just saying I was going to echo Jim's sentiment, say, thank you for attending, giving us the opportunity to talk about MAS 8. Really appreciate you taking the time. And if you have questions, please feel free to reach out, and would be very happy to hear additional topics that you'd like to see discussed.
Great. So we are at the top of the hour, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap up the session. I want, again, from a ZPro perspective, I want to thank everybody for attending today. We do intend to make this a monthly series, so be on the lookout for an invite for our next Straight Talk series session. It's possible, due to the fact that August is a traditional vacation month, and also everybody's getting their children ready for school. Plus, we have Maximo World at the beginning of the month, that we may skip August, but please be on the lookout for additional invites and invitations and information about our Straight Talk series. And just a final plug, ZPro Solutions and Sharptree will be at Maximo World. So if you are going to be on site in Orlando for the Maximo World event that first week of August, please stop by and see us. We'll be in the expo hall at booth 619. Jim will be on site representing Sharptree. He'll be hanging out with us, and we'll have our ZPro team there ready to support any questions you have about OPCO, Maximo, or MAS. So thanks again for your attendance today, and be on the lookout for further information about our Straight Talk series. Have a great day, everybody.